Hello, fellow Rebel Capitals. Hope you're well. Got a new office, got a new studio. The Atlanta Fed GDP Now indicator has plummeted again. I know you're probably thinking to yourself, okay, George, I saw the video last week where it went from positive 2.3% down to 1.5% or negative 1.5%, excuse me. And you were trying to think that through, and it's likely because of a trade deficit, etc. Okay, but now it's gone down even further. So first and foremost, let's get into the Atlanta Fed GDP. And actually, before we do, let's go to Investopedia and find out from them exactly how GDP is calculated, because I want to understand that first, and then we look at what's happening with the Atlanta Fed GDP forecast. And then we say, okay, why is this happening? Is it just the deficit, or is there maybe more to the story? And even if it is the deficit, is that a good thing? I don't know. We'll discuss that in a moment.
The letters GDP are flung around often by the president, the Federal Reserve Board, journalists, and many others. They stand for Gross Domestic Product, which represents the overall market value of all the goods and services a country produces. In a way, it's like a price tag on a country's output, and it measures the size of the economy. The price is determined with the following formula: C plus G plus I plus NX equals GDP, where C is the nation's private consumption or consumer spending, G is the sum of government spending,
Boo.
I is the sum of businesses' capital spending, and NX is the nation's total net exports, exports minus imports. GDP is an important number because it indicates whether a country's economy is growing and expanding or shrinking and contracting. It also gives important information about how the introduction of new products and services or the improvement of existing ones affect demand. This data helps to plan future product development and improvements.
Okay, so first thing I want to point out, so we get it, right? Private sector spending, government spending, basically spending or investment by business. And then you've got to add or subtract what's going on with the trade deficit or the trade surplus. Because what we're trying to solve for, and obviously it's a very imprecise number, but what we're trying to solve for is the goods and services that are produced in the United States. So obviously, if you have imports coming in, well, then that's not being produced in the United States, but yet it's going to be caught in the retail transactions, right? Because if we've got all this stuff coming in from China, you're buying it at Walmart. Well, when you buy it at Walmart, that transaction is going to be factored into GDP. That's the C part of it, the consumer spending or private sector spending. But we didn't produce that here, right? So what we have to do is we have to subtract that, and that's where we look at the trade deficit. Okay. But if there's a trade surplus, then obviously you would want to add that to GDP, because we're so productive that we're producing so much stuff that we can actually export the additional productivity to other countries. And so that was produced in the United States. So we would want to add back a trade surplus, and then we would want to subtract a trade deficit. Because again, what we're trying to solve for is the stuff, goods and services that was produced in the US domestic economy. How efficient, what was the productivity that we had for any given time frame? So now let's go over to the Atlanta Fed and let's see what is doing. What we talked about last week was the GDP right here at, call it 2.3% roughly. And then we just get this Wile E. Coyote moment where it plummets. Now, most people, and even when I was thinking this through on the live stream, we were just looking at the trade deficit. It's like, wow, okay, the trade deficit just came out. That's probably what did it. But then I was like, well, yeah, but I mean, how did they not know there was going to be a trade deficit? And it's not like the month prior we had a trade surplus. I mean, the month prior it was like 120, and then it went to like 150 billion. So 150 billion is a huge number. I think it's the biggest trade deficit we've ever had, but it was trending in that direction. So why was that not picked up? in GDP now. Like it doesn't just happen out of the blue. That was the first kind of head scratcher. But a lot of people were arguing that it was a nothing burger because it's just a result of all these companies trying to front run tariffs, and that makes sense. There's obviously a lot to that. So these companies are worried that, okay, crap, I've got all these input costs or all these inputs that I'm importing in from Mexico or China or Canada or whatever to create my widget. And if Trump puts on a 25% tariff, then I'm going to have to pay an additional 25% for this input. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and load up on inventory right now just to try to front run those tariffs so I don't get caught up holding the bag. And so, again, that makes a lot of sense. Now, should we subtract that part of the deficit from GDP? Probably not. I mean, I get the argument why you wouldn't, but this is kind of an anomaly. When you look at things like the tariffs or surveys of sickness or anything like that, it's not like this happens every single month, or it's not like it happens every single year. So I think the way they're doing that they're calculating it now, again, it's a very imprecise number, but I get why they've got the formula they do. But now what's fascinating is just today, okay, so now you can't blame this one on the trade deficit. We go from negative 1.5% down to almost negative 3%. So and again, I want to restate this for everybody. This is something that you cannot blame on the trade deficit because it happened after the news came out about the 150 billion deficit that we had for the last time that was calculated, I believe last month. So this is what took us from negative 1.5 down to, call it, almost negative 3 was something else. And I don't know how, if you're bullish here, I get how you could dismiss the first move, but I don't know how you can dismiss the next move, especially when you combine that with what's happening with the curve, the near-term forward spread, long end of the curve, everything that we talk about on this channel. Let's see, does it give us an exact? Okay, here you go. Latest estimate, minus 2.8. I mean, we'll have to see how, or actually, let me read this. GDP Now models estimate for real GDP growth in the first quarter of 2025 is negative 2.8% on March 3rd, down from negative 1.5% on February 28th. After this morning's releases from the U.S. Census Bureau and the Institute for Supply Management, the nowcast of first quarter real personal consumption expenditures growth and real private fixed investment growth fell from 1.3% and 3.5%, respectively, to 0.0% and 0.1%. So I think this, and again, I'm just reading this for the first time, guys, but this is, I guess, the rationale for why they took it from negative 1.5 to negative 2.8. And it's, again, because of personal consumption expenditures growth, because that fell from 1.3 down to 0. And real private fixed investment growth fell from 3.5 down to 0.1, basically 0 as well. So, I mean, straight off a cliff, especially for the fixed investment growth. Hey guys, I'd like to personally invite each and every one of you to attend this year's Rebel Capitalist Live. This is the incredible conference I put on annually that helps you build a bulletproof portfolio. It helps you increase your personal freedom and liberty, and also it helps you increase the size of your network. In other words, you get to meet a lot of like-minded individuals, fellow Rebel Capitalists. It's in Orlando, May 23rd through the 25th. Past speakers have included people like Robert Kiyosaki, Ron Paul, Peter Schiff, Mike Maloney, Lynn Alden, just to name a few. So to get your tickets ASAP and to find out who is speaking at this year's Rebel Capitalist Live, you can check it out at rebelcapitalistlive.com. And just a little quick insider information, if you get your tickets sooner than later, you can get a discount, because as we get closer and closer to the event, the tickets go up in price. So don't wait. Go to rebelcapitalistlive.com right now and get your tickets. And I will see you in Orlando, May 23rd through the 25th.